Alien beauty imprisoned and abandoned in darkness, until a human answered her plea. The vast emptiness of space was shattered as the battered human vessel, starward bound, tore from hyperspace at the ragged edge of a swirling, uncharted nebula. Jagged clouds of violet and gold tumbled beyond the bridge viewport, painting the hull in bruised colors. Commander Jonah Reyes stood motionless, his hands gripping the rail, gaze fixed not on the wonder outside, but on the reflection of his own haunted eyes in the glass. Behind him, the bridge was a quiet storm, muted alarms, the hush of exhausted crew, the ghostly hum of failing systems. Ensign Meera Patel's voice cut the silence. Unidentified structure at 312.45. It's a station, but no lights. Jonah blinked. Let's see it. Meera flicked controls, bringing up the sensor feed. The display stuttered, then resolved into the shadowy outline of an outpost, its spindly arms reaching into the nebula's haze. No lights, no docking beacons. The only sign of life, a faint shimmer of power at its core, and a scattering of weak biosigns, flickering like candle flames in a storm. Jonah's jaw tightened. He glanced at the readouts. Barely enough food for another day. Below decks, the children coughed in their bunks, faces pinched and eyes too old. The last refugees of 3 ruined colonies. All of them, his responsibility. He turned to the comm. Any response to hails? Meera shook her head, dark eyes troubled. Nothing. Not even a ping. Jonah exhaled. He straightened, shoulders rolling back as if to bear the weight more squarely. Options? Silence answered. The crew had run out of options days ago. Jonah's voice was steady, decisive. Assemble a boarding team, standard safety protocols. I want full suits, weapons ready, and eyes open for traps. The battered starward-bound shuddered as it eased alongside the lifeless station. Magnetic clamps locked on. Inside the airlock, Jonah checked the charge on his sidearm. Meera slipped on her helmet, face set in determined lines, toolkit slung at her hip. 2 guards followed, rifles at the ready, nerves stretched tight as tripwire. The hatch opened with a reluctant groan. They stepped into corridors bathed in emergency crimson, a blood-red pall that flickered and flowed along metal walls scarred by panic and flight. The station felt haunted, abandoned mid-scream. Scattered belongings, an overturned pack, a doll's broken arm, a child's scrawl of stars, littered the floor. Screens hung from the walls, shattered, lines of alien code frozen mid-warning. But it was the glyphs that stopped them. Gouged deep into the bulkheads, curling with a predator's grace, Sarathian runes, sharp as fangs. Meera's voice barely reached Jonah's ears. Sarathians? This far out? Her fingers traced the edge of a glyph. Jonah nodded, lips tight. Looks like they left in a hurry. Stay sharp. A soft scraping echoed down the corridor. Everyone froze. Then, from the shadows, a plaintive whimper. Small, desperate, shivering with fear. Jonah signaled silence, sweeping his light ahead. The sound came again. They tracked it past upended crates and a cracked medbay door, down a narrow passage where the air stank of ozone and fear. It led them to a sealed hatch, its locking mechanism fused with clumsy welds. Meera crouched by the control panel, her breath fogging the visor. I can crack it, she said, pulling out her tools. Sparks flew as she worked, the silence broken only by the anxious clicking of her picks. Jonah drew his sidearm, sighting the hatch. If the Sarathians locked it up, it's someone they feared. Let's meet them. With a hiss, the hatch slid aside, revealing a cell shrouded in shadows. Their light swept over the cramped space, catching the figure within. A girl, crouched and trembling, her skin shimmering with an impossible tapestry of iridescent teal, violet, and midnight blue. Scales caught the light, shifting in hue as she moved. Amber eyes glinted, vertical pupils narrowing in the glare. Her features were angular, reptilian yet strangely delicate, her neck adorned with a fragile frill that quivered as she drew breath. She was humanoid, slender, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight around herself in exhaustion. Jonah stepped forward, lowering his weapon and signaling Mira to dim the lights. He crouched at the bars, trying to make his voice gentle. "I'm Commander Jonah Reyes. We're not here to hurt you." The girl watched him, wary but unafraid. She hesitated, then pressed her scaled hand to her chest, mimicking his gesture. "Sirai?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly, resonant with music and sorrow. He offered her a canteen. Their hands brushed. Her skin radiated a subtle warmth, energy prickling through his glove. Jonah flinched, startled by the sensation, but Sarai only drank, amber gaze locked on his as if reading the measure of his soul. Behind them, Mira glanced at her scanner. "Jonah, patrol sweep inbound. We don't have much time. Get your tools, med kits, anything that'll help us move her," Jonah ordered, voice urgent but steady. Mira nodded and darted away, the guards fanning out to cover the corridor. Sirai, sensing the shift, pressed her forehead to the bars, eyes wide and pleading. "Please," she whispered, pointing to a humming device above her cell, part restraint, part surveillance, a Sarathian brand of control. Jonah looked back at her, heart racing. He knelt, hands splayed in surrender, trying to offer what little comfort he could. Sarai's gaze fixed on him, trembling with hope and desperate trust. "Human," she breathed, the word trembling with longing as if it were a promise and a prayer all at once. Jonah knelt at Sarai's cell, the crimson emergency lights painting his features with nervous shadows. Sweat traced a line from his brow, stinging his eyes as he studied the alien device mounted above the hatch. Its surface was slick with some kind of organic alloy, both metal and living tissue. He ran his gloved fingers over the seams, searching for purchase, but the panel yielded nothing under his probing touch. The tools from his belt, a plasma pick, a vibroblade, even Mira's universal decryptor, barely scratched the surface. "Sarathian biolock," he muttered, frustration mounting as the seconds slipped away. "Nothing standard about it." Sirai watched him, her amber gaze luminous in the gloom. Understanding flickered in her eyes, and she reached through the bars, tapping a slender finger against a seam nearly invisible to the human eye. With a few swift gestures, she indicated a hidden latch, then mimed a series of hand movements, twisting, pressing, coaxing the mechanism open. She was showing him what she'd learned during her captivity, knowledge paid for with endless hours of observation and pain. Jonah caught on quickly, following her cues. He pressed the edge of his blade to the spot she'd marked, feeling a faint give beneath the metal. The panel slid aside with a whisper, revealing a tangle of glowing organic filaments and a pulsing crystal node. The air inside the cell shimmered faintly, thick with some unseen energy. Sirai brought her hands together, scales flickering with the promise of light. "Energy. Shield. Life," she whispered, struggling to find the words. Between her fingers, a mote of silver-blue light sparked to life, swirling like a tiny sun. For a heartbeat, the cell seemed to fill with warmth, but then her face twisted in pain, and the light snapped out, leaving her trembling, breathless. Jonah's chest tightened. "It's keeping you weak," he realized, staring at the suppressor. "Draining you, holding you here." The station groaned around them, the failing system sending a cold breeze through the corridor. The lights flickered. Jonah checked the environmental readout on his sleeve, oxygen levels dropping fast. He wiped sweat from his brow, urgency burning away hesitation. Air's thinning, he said. We're almost out of time. He dug through his kit, pulling out a battered auxiliary battery and a length of insulated wire. Sarai watched, curiosity shining through her exhaustion. Jonah worked fast, hands moving by instinct, stripping wires with his teeth, jamming leads into the suppressor's crystalline heart. This may hurt, he warned, voice low. Are you ready? Sarai nodded, bracing herself against the bars. Her scales dimmed, her frill pressed flat in anticipation. Jonah triggered the circuit, sending a surge of raw power through the device. Sparks flew, the field shimmered and buzzed, and Sarai's body arched in agony. Then, with a shriek of rending metal, the suppressor sputtered and died. The shimmering field winked out, leaving only the soft hum of the station's wounded heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cell door slid open with a reluctant sigh. Sarai stared at the threshold, disbelief warring with hope in her golden eyes. She took a trembling step forward, her scales catching the red light, growing brighter, more vivid with each breath. Another step. Her knees buckled. Jonah surged forward, catching her before she could fall. Their skin touched, her hand in his arm around her waist. A gentle warmth pulsed where they met, not the harsh crackle of static, but something deeper, a slow, reassuring thrum that seemed to settle in Jonah's chest. Sarai looked up at him, her eyes wide with wonder, her lips parted in a shaky smile. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Her hands gripped his with surprising strength, and the warmth between them steadied, comforting, grounding. Jonah smiled, nerves frayed but spirit lifting. We're not safe yet. Can you stand? She nodded, pushing to her feet, scales aglow with new life. He slipped off his jacket, draping it over her thin shoulders. She shivered but straightened, resolve hardening her delicate features. Mira's voice crackled in his earpiece, edged with panic. Hull's unstable. We need to go, Jonah, now. Jonah glanced at Sarai. Can you walk? Yes, she answered, voice steadier now. Show way. Sirens erupted, shrill and unrelenting, echoing down the corridors. From somewhere deeper in the station, mechanical whirs and metallic thuds signaled the awakening of automated defenses. Sarai's head snapped up. Defense systems, she warned, voice urgent. Patrol coming. Heavy shutters slammed into place at the far end of the hall, and a trio of sentry drones rolled into view, armored shells bristling with pulse emitters. Jonah shoved Sarai behind him, sidearm raised, finger tensing on the trigger. Before he could fire, Sarai stepped forward, hands raised, energy crackling between her scaled fingers. She moved with surprising grace, drawing on strength newly freed. Bolts of light arced from her palms, striking the lead drone. Circuits fried, servos whined, and the machine collapsed in a heap of sparking metal. The effort drained her, shoulders slumping. Jonah steadied her as she closed her eyes, drawing on the dying station's power grid. Electricity danced along her arms, her scales glowing like a constellation. She sent a pulse of force down the corridor, shorting the remaining drones and plunging the passage into sudden, breathless silence. Jonah pulled her into a narrow alcove as debris rained down from a nearby breach. Their bodies pressed close, hearts hammering in tandem. He could feel the heat radiating from her, not just the warmth of her skin, but something deeper. An energy that seeped through his bones, igniting a strange, exhilarating sense of connection. Sarai looked up at him, eyes searching. In that moment, words weren't needed. The understanding between them was silent, yet unmistakable. The klaxons wailed louder now. A bulkhead buckled behind them. Jonah took her hand, guiding her quickly through the labyrinth of failing corridors, Mira's beacon blinking on his HUD. At the airlock, Mira waited, eyes wide as she took in the sight of Sarai, her scales radiant, her form haloed in shimmering light. "Who is she?" Mira breathed, awe and suspicion mingling in her tone. Jonah hesitated only a heartbeat. "Our guest," he said, voice resolute, "and maybe our hope." Sirai turned to the console, her hand hovering over the controls. With practiced precision, she overloaded the security grid, sending a surge through the station's systems. Barriers fell, doors groaned open, and a corridor of light blazed straight to the ship's docking arm. They sprinted for the starward bound, alarms screaming behind them. Jonah half-carried Sirai, her strength flagging with each step, but her spirit unbroken. Mira keyed the hatch, ushering them inside as the station shuddered, fire blooming in the void beyond. Inside the ship's safe embrace, Sirai sagged against Jonah, her hand still gripping his, scales dimming but heart steady. He felt her pulse through the contact, an echo of his own, and saw the relief in her eyes. "Freedom," she whispered, the word a promise and a song. Her light pulsed in gentle rhythm with his heartbeat, a new hope glowing between them as the starward bound pulled away from the dying station, racing toward the unknown. Jonah laid Sarai gently on the narrow cot of the infirmary, the overhead medlights flickering between stark white and emergency red. She was barely conscious, her scales dulled, the faint shimmer of her energy now a mere memory on her skin. The ship's medic, a grizzled woman with steady hands and tired eyes, hovered over her, scanner humming. "Her readings are unlike anything I've seen," the medic said, brows furrowing. "Blood chemistry's alien, cell structures are reactive. I can treat the wounds, but there's no telling what'll help or hurt. Alien biology is unpredictable, Commander." Jonah's jaw set. He nodded, but refused to move away. "Just do what you can," he said softly, sitting at Sarai's side. His fingers itched to reach for her hand, to offer comfort. But he hesitated, unsure what touch might mean, unsure if it would help or harm. Time bled away in the hush of the infirmary. Sarai's breath steadied. Jonah sat watch, exhaustion seeping into his bones. Every time he tried to stand, a strange ache tugged him back. He couldn't leave her, not after what they'd faced together. When at last the medic insisted he rest, her tone brooking no argument, Jonah relented. He lingered at the door, glancing back as the monitor's soft beeps marked Siray's fragile recovery. Later, in his quarters, Jonah stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The ache of separation gnawed at him, sharper than any wound. He pressed his palm to his chest, remembering the warmth he'd felt when their skin had met, a pulse of hope in a universe that had taken everything from him. A faint shuffle at the door. Jonah sat up as it slid open. Sirai stood there, swathed in a simple tunic that hung awkwardly on her slender frame. Her scales had regained a hint of their iridescence, casting shifting colors across her cheeks. She moved quietly, uncertainty in her steps. "You're awake," Jonah said, relief threading his words. Sarai tilted her head, amber eyes thoughtful. She crossed the room and perched beside him, her hand brushing his. The connection was instant, a low, gentle warmth blooming where they touched. "Why help a stranger?" she asked softly, searching his face, her voice a blend of gratitude and vulnerability. Jonah met her gaze, his voice raw. "Because I've lost everything too. I know what it is to have nowhere left to run, no one left to trust." He hesitated, then squeezed her fingers. "Maybe I just needed to believe in saving someone again." Sarai's gaze softened, a glimmer of pain flickering behind her eyes. She turned her hand in his, palm to palm, and spoke in halting but clear standard. "My people, the Marathi, were peaceful. We loved the stars, we traded, we built gardens in the void. Then the Sarathians came. They wanted our worlds, our resources, our technology. They invaded without warning." She swallowed, her frill trembling. The prison, where you found me, was not just a cell. It was for extracting secrets from Marathi leaders and scientists. They used pain and machines, tried to break us for codes, knowledge, things we would never give. I was the counselor's daughter. They wanted access to the HeartNet, our only safe haven. I never gave in. Jonah listened, jaw clenched, heart twisting at the bravery in her quiet words. You survived, he murmured. I endured. Her eyes shimmered with old grief. But I am not the only one. There are others, lost or hidden. The medic's voice sounded from the comm, terse and urgent. Commander, you better come. There's something you need to see. They hurried back to the infirmary. Sarai tensed as the medic gestured to a hollow image projected above the scanner. Embedded near the base of her spine, woven into the delicate scales, was a dark metallic device. It's a Sarathian tracker, the medic said grimly, transmitting low-frequency signals. It's been quiet. Until now. Sarai's breathing quickened, panic sparking in her eyes. They can find me. They can find all of you. Jonah slid to the console, fingers dancing over the logs. The transmission was already pinging across the sector. A Sarathian code, urgent and unmistakable. The enemy knew she was missing. Worse, the logs showed an intercepted signal. The Sarathians now suspected human involvement. He looked up, meeting Sarai's terrified gaze. They're coming. They know you're with us. Sarai's scales shimmered, colors shifting from panic to steely resolve. There is something else. Her voice dropped, urgent but determined. The prison held more than captives. Deep in the walls, hidden, are data cores, records of Sarathian crimes, proof of what they've done. If we can reach the core and reveal the truth, the Marathi will have powerful friends. The Sarathians want it buried. Help me reveal them, and your people may find allies, maybe even sanctuary. Jonah absorbed her words, hope and fear warring in his chest. Before he could answer, a blaring klaxon split the air. Red strobes flashed. Mira's voice erupted over the comm, breathless. Proximity alarm. Sarathian warship just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us, demanding we surrender immediately. Jonah grabbed Sarai's hand, urgency thrumming between them. They raced for the bridge, dodging frantic crew as Starward Bound shook beneath their feet. On the bridge, the holoscreen flared to life with a menacing image. A Sarathian dreadnought, black as midnight, bristling with weapons. The comm crackled, a guttural alien voice booming, translated into chilling standard. This is Commander Varkos. You harbor a fugitive and stolen secrets. Surrender now, or be destroyed. Helm, get us out of here, Jonah barked, the words a lifeline. Head for the asteroid belt, full speed, evasive. Mira's fingers flew over the controls. Shields won't hold for long. They're powering weapons. Sarai stepped to the shield console, her hands trembling as she pressed them to the surface. Energy pulsed from her palms, arcing into the failing shields. For a heartbeat, the barrier surged, blue and gold holding fast against the incoming barrage. She staggered, breathing hard, but pointed out the viewport. There, she said, voice tight with strain. Hollow asteroid. We can hide. Jonah nodded, guiding the ship toward the tumbling rock. Mira, power down everything but life support. Make us look dead. The ship slipped into the asteroid's shadow, tension thick as the dreadnought prowled nearby. Crew held their breath as power levels dropped, the only sounds the distant rattle of the hull and the frantic beat of Jonah's heart. Sarai leaned in close, whispering so only he could hear. That is Commander Varkos's ship. He is relentless. He does not forgive. He will hunt us to the ends of the stars. Jonah shifted closer, shoulders brushing hers. The contact steadied her, warmth flowing between them, a silent promise of safety. He watched her draw strength from the touch, her scales humming with faint light. They stood that way for a long moment, danger pressing on all sides. Then Jonas spoke, voice low but sure. "We need a way out, Sarai. If you can boost the engines, maybe we can outrun them." Sarai hesitated, pain and resolve flickering in her gaze. "I can interface with your drive core. My energy can amplify the output, but it will drain me." Jonas shook his head. "I won't risk you like that." She reached for him, her hand finding his, energy sparking between their skin. "Some risks are worth it, Jonah. If we don't try, we're all lost." Their eyes met. The connection deepened, a silent understanding passing between them. Fear, hope, longing. Jonah squeezed her hand, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. I don't want to lose you." Sarai's smile was soft, almost luminous. "You saved me. Let me help you now." Mira's voice cut through, urgent. "Commander, the Sarathians are breaking off. They're sweeping the field, but haven't found us yet." Jonah drew a shaky breath. He looked at Sarai, determination hardening in his eyes. "Show me how to help." Sarai moved closer, her scales brushing his skin, her presence a living fire. "It requires touch, close, sustained. Our energies must flow together." Jonah grinned, the first real smile in days. "I think I can manage that." Their fingers intertwined, and as the bridge lights flickered, a new spark of hope ignited between them, brighter than any threat waiting outside. Starward Bound glided into dock at Spiral Nexus, the vessel's battered hull dwarfed by the station's glittering arms. Through the viewport, Jonah saw a city spun from starlight and steel, rings alive with neon, ships weaving between turrets and spires, the airspace a hive of commerce and secrets. As the airlock cycled open, the scents of strange spices, ozone, and oil drifted aboard, carrying the promise of 1,000 unknown dangers. Jonah turned to Sarai, holding out a hooded cloak. "Here, keep it on and stay close. Sarathian spies are everywhere on Nexus." Sarai slipped the cloak over her scales, the deep gray fabric swallowing her iridescence. She drew the hood low, amber eyes peeking out as she moved to Jonah's side. The rest of the crew stood nearby, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. No one spoke until Mira stepped forward, offering a small, awkward smile. "She's with us," Mira said to the others, "political refugee, under Commander's protection." A quiet acceptance rippled through the group. Respectful nods, a few wary glances. Sarai inclined her head, gratitude flickering across her face. They joined the flow of travelers onto the promenade, swept into the pulse of the station. Spiral Nexus lived up to its name. Spirals of platforms and walkways layered with species from every corner of the sector. Banners fluttered above market stalls, voices rose in a cacophony of languages, and everywhere gleamed the promise of goods. Exotic fruits, tech trinkets, ancient relics, and wild stories. The crowd pressed in, shifting and surging. Sarai's eyes widened with awe. She stared openly at a pair of crystalline-bodied traders, then at a child with metallic wings darting past a vendor hawking songs in floating orbs. She reached for Jonah's hand, their fingers brushing. The energy between them was quieter now, a gentle warmth that radiated trust rather than urgency. Jonah squeezed her hand, guiding her through the throng. "Humans adapt," he said softly, watching her take in the chaos and color. "We don't always blend in, but we find ways to survive." They wove their way toward the edge of the main level, passing through a security checkpoint and down a quieter passage. The air grew cooler, the crowd thinning. Ahead, a door marked with a stylized spiral and a trio of intersecting stars caught Sarai's attention. She touched Jonah's arm, nodding at the symbol. "I know this," she whispered. "It's a mark of the resistance. My people used it too." Jonah checked their surroundings, then pressed the chime. After a pause, The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit space where a handful of figures sat around a battered holotable. At their head stood a tall, sharp-eyed woman in a commander's uniform, Halden. Halden's gaze swept over them, wary but curious. "State your business." Jonah stepped forward. "Commander Jonah Reyes, we're seeking safe passage and we have information you'll want." Sarai hesitated, then lowered her hood. The light revealed the shimmer of her scales and the noble set of her jaw. A hush fell. Halden's eyes widened. "I survived Sarathian captivity," Sarai said, her voice steady. "I carry proof, evidence of their crimes." The room went still. Halden's hand hovered near her sidearm, but she did not draw. Instead, she searched Sarai's face, recognition dawning. "You're Marathi. Counselor Sarai? We thought your kind lost. No one escaped the purge." Sarai nodded, sorrow flickering in her eyes. "I am nearly the last. But I have data cores, hidden records. They will expose the Sarathians if broadcast." Halden gestured for them to sit. "You'll want privacy for this. Come with me." In a small side chamber, far from prying eyes, Sarai sat on a low bench, clutching the edge of her cloak. Jonah took the seat beside her, his presence a quiet anchor as she closed her eyes. Memories flickered behind her lids, dark corridors, cold metal, codes burned into her mind. With a trembling hand, she activated the memory crystal embedded in her wrist. Holograms bloomed in the air, blueprints of secret Sarathian facilities, lists of prisoners, footage of atrocities. Halden watched, her expression hardening. "If we broadcast this from a secure relay, the whole galaxy will see the truth," she said, "but it has to be done from inside Nexus's comm grid. We'll plan tonight, strike tomorrow before the Sarathians catch wind." The planning dragged on, voices hushed but tense. As the night wore thin, the safe house emptied, leaving Jonah and Sarai alone in their borrowed quarters. Jonah paced, glancing at the narrow bed set against opposite walls. "I can sleep elsewhere if you want privacy," he offered, uncertain. He reached for the extra blanket, ready to retreat. Sarai rose, the cloak slipping from her shoulders. She crossed the room in silence, stopping just before him. Her hand found his, fingers threading together, the contact sending a familiar, gentle warmth through his arm. "My people. We sleep near those we trust," she said, her voice soft, vulnerable. "I trust you, Jonah." He let the blanket drop, overcome by a wave of emotion he hadn't let himself feel in years. Slowly, he drew her closer, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "Since you found me," he murmured, "everything changed. I thought I was just surviving. But now—" Sarai smiled, her amber eyes luminous. "You helped me find hope, even in the dark." He leaned in, breath mingling with hers. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deeper. The glow of her scales lighting the dim room with soft blue and violet. The warmth that flowed between them now was more than energy, more than survival. It was belonging. She rested her forehead against his, breath steady. "Tomorrow is dangerous," she whispered, voice trembling with a courage born of loss. "But tonight, let's find peace." Jonah wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as the station's lights spun outside, and for a few precious hours, hope eclipsed fear. The Sarathian relay hub drifted above the jagged surface of asteroid X-19, a latticework of black metal and harsh blue lights, its antennae clawing at the void. In the cramped belly of a stealth shuttle, the team readied themselves, tension taut in the recycled air. Resistance fighters checked their gear in silence, faces set with grim determination. Jonah and Sarai stood apart, faces half-shrouded by the synth fabric masks of Sarathian laborers, uniforms pressed and unfamiliar against their skin. Jonah eyed Sarai as she tucked her frill beneath a worker's cap, her scales dimmed to a dull gunmetal sheen. He saw the strain it took for her to suppress her natural glow, to stifle the energy that wanted to shimmer beneath her skin. She caught his worry and forced a smile. "I can manage," she said, though her voice trembled on the last syllable. He squeezed her hand briefly, the contact sparking a hidden current between them. "Just stay close. If anything goes wrong—" "We finish the mission," she interrupted, chin lifted with quiet resolve. A hiss of hydraulics. The ramp dropped. The shuttle's camouflage held, flickering in the hub's shadow as the team slipped into the heart of enemy territory. The relay's corridors were sterile, patrolled by Sarathian officers in midnight armor. Jonah and Sarai merged into the flow of shift workers, heads down, every sense tuned to danger. Their footsteps echoed in perfect rhythm, every movement calculated. Sarai kept her hands clasped, hiding the faint tremor in her fingers. Jonah scanned every junction, mind mapping the route to the data core. Then, too suddenly, alarms blared. An angry, metallic howl that ricocheted off the walls. Sirens painted the corridor in violent red. Sarai froze. Jonah grabbed her arm, heart pounding. A Sarathian security officer rounded the corner, weapon drawn. His eyes, cold and predatory, raked over them. "Identification, protocol recitation, now." Sarai's lips parted. "Workers Zeta 41, station maintenance, authorized for—" She faltered, the next phrase lost in a snarl of alien language. The guard's gaze narrowed. Jonas stepped forward, trying to intercede, but it was too late. Weapons came up, aimed at their hearts. "Stop! Do not move!" Their cover was gone. Jonas shoved Sarai behind him, body shielding hers. "Get to the core," he barked. "Finish it." Their hands brushed, an electric arc leapt between them, a silent promise. Then Sarai tore away, vanishing into a side passage. Jonah turned, weapon drawn, but was quickly surrounded. He fought back, buying her precious seconds, until a stun baton slammed into his temple and darkness swallowed the world. Jonah awoke, wrists bound behind an iron chair in a windowless cell. His head throbbed, vision swimming with pain. Across the room stood Commander Varkos, broad-shouldered and draped in the cruel finery of Sarathian command. The reptilian lines of his face were twisted in triumph. "The Marathi was the last with the codes," Varkos sneered. "Now she conspires with humans." "A fitting end to your pitiful alliance." Jonas spat blood to the floor, glaring up at his captor. "You're afraid of the truth getting out. That's why you're here." Varkos smiled thinly. "We will learn everything, Commander. You will assist." He signaled to a technician, who wheeled in a device bristling with neural spikes. A mind probe. Metal arms gripped Jonah's temples, icy and invasive. Pain blossomed through Jonah's skull as the probe drilled into his memories, rifling through thoughts and feelings. He clamped his jaw, gritting out a taunt. "You'll never break her. She's stronger than you." Meanwhile, above them, Sarai crawled through the relay's service ducts, every movement careful and desperate. She clung to darkness, breath shallow, listening to the echo of boots and shouted orders as security fanned out below. At a junction, she bypassed a lock, fingers nimble despite exhaustion. A vent opened onto the data core's heart, a chamber of servers pulsing with cold blue light. She dropped to the floor, heart racing. The door behind her rattled. Guards pounded and shouted. Sarai ignored them, reaching for the transmitter port. She pulled the Marathi data core from her sleeve, plugging it into the broadcast node. The console flickered to life, progress bar crawling forward as the files uploaded. Images of massacre, stolen technology, the faces of her people suffering, dying, resisting. The pounding grew louder. Sweat beaded on her brow as she entered override codes, voice trembling but determined. Come on, come on. In his cell, agony washed through Jonah as the probe clawed for secrets. Varkos leaned in, savoring the torment. Where is she? Where are the files? Jonah forced a smile even as pain seared his nerves. You're already too late. She's better than you ever imagined. The lights flickered, the probe shuddering with a sudden surge. Somewhere above, circuits overloaded. Energy humming with Sirai's unmistakable signature. In the relay's control room, alarms shrieked as the system crashed, security feeds spiraling into static. Sirai, glowing with the last of her strength, overrode the final lock. Her energy poured into the servers, the upload spiking to completion. Across the network, every screen on the station and beyond erupted with forbidden images. Sarathian war crimes, atrocities, Marathi resistance. The galaxy would see it all. The door buckled, guards forcing their way in. Sarai yanked the core free, stumbling into the vent as gunfire tore through the air. Her glow faded to a faint silvery shimmer as she crawled, every muscle burning. Chaos engulfed the hub. Jonah, forgotten in the uproar, twisted his wrists, using the distraction to wrench free of his bonds. The probe, overloaded by Sarai's pulse, sputtered and died. Varkos lunged, but Jonah fought back with raw desperation, seizing the stun baton and sending the Sarathian crashing to the floor. He staggered into the corridor, alarms and shouts ringing in his ears. "Sirai!" he called, searching frantically. The main dock loomed ahead, escape pods, shuttles, and the promise of freedom. He found her slumped beside the hangar doors, body curled in on itself, scales flickering weakly. She looked up as he knelt beside her, eyes glassy but alive. "You made it," she whispered, voice ragged but triumphant. He pulled her into his arms, hugging her fiercely. "You did it. The truth is out. They can't hide it anymore." Footsteps thundered behind them, Sarathian guards closing in. Shots rang out, but then another sound cut through. The roar of shuttle engines and the Resistance's battle cry. Halden's shuttle screeched into the bay, fighters pouring out, covering Jonah and Sarai's retreat in a hail of plasma fire. Jonah half-carried Sarai aboard, the doors sealing just as return fire sparked off the hull. Inside, the Resistance crew whooped, slapping Jonah on the back and guiding Sarai to a bunk. She leaned against Jonah, spent but smiling. "It's done," she breathed, her head resting on his shoulder, the bond between them humming with new strength. Jonah pressed a kiss to her hair, voice quiet and full of promise. "It's just beginning." And as the shuttle leapt into the stars, Sarai closed her eyes, hope rising with every mile between them and the darkness they'd left behind. At the Resistance base, the air was thick with the scent of metal and the hum of hope. Sarai rested in Jonah's arms, her head nestled against his chest as the chaos of the day faded into a softer kind of silence. Her scales, once dulled by exhaustion, glimmered faintly in the dim light, each breath she drew steadier than the last. Outside, Resistance fighters hurried past in celebration, but inside their small quarters, time slowed to the rhythm of two hearts healing together. Sarai lifted her gaze, amber eyes glowing with lingering doubt and gratitude. "Why risk so much for me?" she whispered, voice trembling as if she feared the answer. Jonah brushed a lock of midnight blue hair from her brow. "Because I understand loss," he said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "And because you matter, to your people, to this cause, and to me." Her lips parted in surprise. Jonah leaned in, and their kiss glowed with gentle energy, a soft light blooming between them. It was more than passion, an unspoken promise of hope, of beginnings, of a world remade by courage and trust. The moment lingered, carrying them forward into a new dawn. A sharp knock interrupted them. Mira burst in, breathless and grinning. You have to see this. The whole galaxy has seen your broadcast. There are riots on Sarathian worlds, crews deserting, uprisings in the colonies. The news feeds are on fire. Jonah smiled, cradling Sarai's hand. You did it, he murmured, and the pride in his voice was a balm against every old wound. Later, in the grand chamber of the Galactic Assembly, Jonah and Sarai stood side by side as envoys from 100 worlds watched the evidence play across towering holoscreens. Images of Sarathian atrocities, the suffering of the Marathi, and the Resistance's desperate heroism filled the air with outrage and sorrow. Senators rose to their feet, demanding action. The crimes could no longer be buried. Debate raged for days, but the tide had turned. Sanctions swept across Sarathian territories, crippling their fleets and freezing their accounts. Allies rallied, offering aid to the liberated colonies. The Assembly's final vote was decisive, voices echoing with the promise of liberation. In the aftermath, as the chamber emptied and the fate of worlds shifted, Sarai stood before a memorial projection of her people. Faces she had known and lost. Her shoulders shook with silent grief. Jonah joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. I miss them all, she said quietly. I wish they could have seen this day. Jonah squeezed her hand, his gaze soft. You're their legacy, Sarai. You carried their light through darkness. Now it shines for everyone. Her tears fell, but for the first time they were not only for loss, they were for hope. She turned into Jonah's embrace, letting herself be held. In time, the galaxy's wounds began to heal. Jonah and Sarai chose a tranquil world on the edge of charted space, a place where the land rolled in green hills and the sky sang with unfamiliar constellations. Here, they built a home that was neither wholly human nor wholly Marathi, but a place where both traditions could grow together. Walls were adorned with Marathi glyphs and human art. Gardens bloomed with alien blossoms and Earth's roses. Children's laughter filled the halls, little ones with scales and soft hair, with golden eyes and curious minds. Their skin shimmered with iridescence, their laughter a melody that blended the past and future. Jonah watched as Sarai knelt in the grass, teaching the children to weave patterns in the soil, Marathi style. She looked up, catching his gaze, and smiled. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in violet and gold, Jonah and Sarai sat together on the porch. The children played in the twilight, their voices drifting through the warm air. Sarai leaned into Jonah's side, her head resting on his shoulder. We changed the stars, she said, voice full of wonder and disbelief. We did, he answered softly, pressing a kiss to her scaled forehead. And we're not done yet. Years passed in a gentle blur of seasons and milestones. When their youngest child was old enough to travel, Jonah and Sarai returned to Sarai's restored homeworld, a place once scarred by war, now blooming with the work of many hands. The old council hall had become a memorial, a sanctuary for the names and memories of the lost. Jonah walked with Sarai through the tranquil garden, their children darting between flowering trees. Sarai paused before a tall stone etched with Marathi script, her fingers tracing the names of those who had come before. They would be proud, she said quietly, voice trembling as she honored her ancestors and fallen kin. Jonah wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. Of you, he replied. You gave them a voice when it mattered most. Their children's laughter echoed through the memorial, a sound brighter than the bells in the towers. The galaxy had changed. Commander Varkos now stood trial before the assembly, stripped of his power, his crimes exposed for all to see. The Sarathian grip on the stars was broken, and peace, at last, began to blossom in the spaces where fear had once ruled. Jonah and Sarai's love had sparked it all, a union of courage and hope that reached beyond borders and species. Their story spread across the worlds, a tale whispered in the marketplaces, retold in classrooms, painted on murals, and sung by children who had never known war. As dusk fell on Sarai's homeworld, Jonah and Sarai walked hand in hand, their steps slow and unhurried. The sky above blazed with new constellations, and the promise of tomorrow lingered in the air. Their bond, gentle, luminous, unbreakable, remained proof that even in the darkest night, light endures. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.